Hey guys, Brad Gilmore here. Want to give a big shout out to our title sponsor, Walker Texas Lawyer. If you or a loved one have been injured in an accident, whether that be a car, truck, motorcycle accident, or some kind of other issue, hit up Walker Texas Lawyer at 713-552-1117 or walkertexaslawyer.com.
Oh, Brad, what have you done now?
Broadcasting live from Houston, Texas, and around the world. TV host, best-selling author, and radio personality Brad Gilmore brings you a collection of conversations with stars from movies.
Matthew McConaughey.
Brad Gilmore.
Mark Wahlberg.
Hey, how are you?
The legendary Mr. Christopher Lloyd. Christopher, how are we doing?
I'm doing good. Great introduction.
Television.
Jimmy Fallon joins us this morning. Jimmy, how you doing, my friend?
Good morning. Thank you so much, Brad, for having me. I appreciate this, bud.
Kelly Ripa.
Brad, thank you for having me.
Comedy.
Jay Leno joins us. Jay, how you doing?
Hey, Brad, what's going on?
Chris Tucker is in the building. Chris Tucker, good morning to you.
Hey, Brad. Good morning to you. How are you?
Gabriel Fluffy Iglesias.
Good morning.
Music.
Lola Monroe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The legendary frontman of AC/DC, Brian Johnson, joins us right now. Brian, how you doing?
Good morning, Brad. What looking to talk to me, funny lad.
Grammy Award winner Maya joins us.
How are you?
And more. This is The Collection. Now your host, The Boat.
Well, Comicpalooza is right around the corner, and one of the guests that people are really excited to see is joining us right now to talk about his legendary career and the fact that you can see him at Comicpalooza right here in Houston, Texas. He is the often imitated but never duplicated Andrew Robinson. Andrew, how are you, sir?
I'm all right, Brad. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time. You know, Comicpalooza is right around the corner, and I know you have the opportunities nowadays to meet and greet a lot of the fans from all over the country who've seen you in countless projects that you've been in. Do you still enjoy going to these conventions and seeing all the people?
Oh yeah. I have a good time. I like meeting people. I enjoy the whole process. It's it was when I started doing conventions, it was revelatory because it was the first time I got a chance to meet the fans who have supported my career throughout these years, and for the most part, they're very good people. I've had very few negative experiences.
So walk me through that first time. Were you not sure of what you were going to encounter? Because, you know, if no one's been to a Comic Con before or a convention of any kind, especially one the size of Comicpalooza, they might not know what to expect. Were you kind of expecting what you were walking into?
Oh, I had no idea. I was a lamb to the slaughter. No. I mean, it was, and the first few that I went to were very small. I mean, Comicpalooza is gigantic compared to the ones that I first went to.
And when you have these, what are some of the stories that stand out to you? Because I'm sure, like, when you talk about the interactions you've had with people over the years, I'm sure that sometimes people bring great gifts or great memorabilia or have a great story to share with you. Are there any that stick out, or there have just been so many over the years it's hard to narrow down?
Well, it's hard because we don't get a chance to meet that long. So I don't really get into, someone's, a life story. I mean, it'd be great if I could, but there just isn't the time to do that. I mean, for the most part, it's an interaction, and it's a pleasant interaction. And I get a chance to, as you said, to meet people from all over the place, and that's, the fact that I've been an actor for God knows, for a long time, and I get a chance to meet not only the people who supported me, but I mean their children and their grandchildren is mind blowing. That's the thing that's really quite wonderful about it, especially with the Trek franchise. I mean, I've had people come in that I've known for years, and they've come back with their children and some with their grandchildren.
It's interesting when you bring up Star Trek, because I was thinking about it earlier. I feel like that was the first fan base that was ever given a name. I never remember any fan base having a name before there were Trekkies. Do you know what I mean? Like they called the
No, I think
fans
you're right.
specifically Trekkies because the fandom is so large and it is so passionate. I'm assuming that you've felt that over the years.
Well, yeah, I think you're right, Brad. And the thing is that it was like, and especially when I started doing this in the '90s, while Deep Space Nine was on, it was like I had no idea, that what these things were. And indeed, I mean, it is the first fan base that I think that did have a name.
Yeah, they were named specifically. So, if you don't mind sharing, I'm always fascinated by, what was the moment that was the eureka moment, for lack of a better term, the light bulb that sparked in you to where you said, "This is what I want to do with my life. I want to get into the arts. I want to be an actor, whether that be stage or screen." Where was that moment of inspiration for you?
Well, they're very simple. It was like I applied for a Fulbright scholarship. I graduated from college, and I had no idea what I was going to do, or I was about to graduate from college. And I ran into an old art history teacher of mine, and he asked me, so what are you going to do with your life? And I said, I don't know. I think I might become a teacher. Newspaper work is interesting to me. He said, no, no, you're an actor. You should be an actor. And it turned out he from the college plays that I had done, he was a big fan of my work. And he literally was the guy that pushed me over the edge. And so I asked him, I said, well, yeah, that'd be great, but how do you become an actor? I have no idea. And he told me, he said, you apply to the State Department for a Fulbright scholarship. You apply for a scholarship to London, where they have great acting schools, and you go there as if it's a slam dunk.
Right.
I'm applying for a driver's license, not realizing that it is a very competitive thing. I mean,
Slightly.
thousands of people are applying for these scholarships, and God knows, I mean, the strangest thing, the only time in my life that I won something.
So you get this scholarship based on this recommendation from your art history teacher. But had you had any, like, what made him say you're an actor? Did you have any
Well,
inclination of
because
that before?
I'd done plays in college, and so
Right.
he'd
Okay.
see me in these plays in college, and that's what he said. He said, "You're an actor, you're foolish to think of doing something else." And I'm forever grateful to him, because I went to a fabulous school, and it was while I was at the school, the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, that's when I decided this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. The thing is, Brad, I always wanted to be an actor secretly. It was like a dirty little secret of mine. Because I was as a kid, I was, I loved movies, and I fell in love with the whole thing. But I thought that was people on another planet do that. This planet called, I don't know, Los Angeles or something.
Somewhere in Deep Space Nine. But
Yes.
I feel like that's such an important part of educators and teachers in our lives, because they see potential in us sometimes we don't see in ourselves, or like you said, secretly want to do, but they sometimes can embolden us to do so. It's a different relationship than with a parent or a family member. I feel when an educator reaches out and say, hey, you should really do this, because it's someone from outside your family who has no reason to say this.
That's a great point, Brad. You're absolutely right. I mean, my mother would have said, "Oh yeah, be an actor," and I said, "Yeah, thanks, Ma." Next. But you're absolutely right. He was, and plus the fact that he was a great teacher and someone I respected immensely. So yeah, his opinion had a big influence on what I did.
So you go through the schooling, you become a actor. When did you have that first break, as it were? When did you say, wow, I'm actually in show business? When was that moment for you?
Well, I felt that way when I got the scholarship.
Okay.
But I guess the first thing was when I finished, when I came back to the States, and I started back in those days, Brad, we had repertory theaters all over the country. And it was a great thing because young actors like myself, you'd go to a theater in New York where all the repertory theaters from all over the country came to New York. And for one day, You pulled a number and you went in and you did your monologues and you found out if somebody was going to hire you. And I got a couple job offers from that first, and from that moment when I got my first job at the Milwaukee Rep, that was it. I felt like I'm in the game. I'm making $50 a week. What could be terrible?
It's the greatest day of your life, right? I mean, do it,
Yeah,
but
it
you'll
was
get.
the greatest day. One of them. Yeah.
I'm sure. I'm sure it was high up there. We all remember when we got the first paycheck for doing something that we actually loved. It didn't really matter the dollar amount. It was almost just, wow,
No.
I can't believe I've convinced somebody to give me this. You know?
No, and the thing is, as an actor, you take a vow of poverty. If you decide to be an
Sure.
actor, nobody's going to come up with you, with a seven-year contract for a TV show or a three movie deal. That's not the way it works. You have to decide, okay, I want to be an actor, so how do I pay the rent? And at the beginning, you're not going to do it acting. You're going to do it some other way.
Yeah, you have to find. Yeah, there's the stories of waiting tables or doing whatever you can to make ends
Oh, I
meet
was
when
a
you're.
terrible waiter. I was a terrible waiter. I listen, I was such a terrible waiter that I had no choice. I had to be successful as an actor.
You couldn't have done anything else. That's a good.
Oh,
That's another good motivating factor. You know what I mean? I'm really
it
bad
sure
at my
was.
job, so let me try this passion out a little bit more. Of course, and I'm sure you've talked about it a lot, but to me, Dirty Harry is one of the first movies I can remember my father. My father's born 1945, and I remember he and I sitting down when I was very young. I'm the youngest of four, and he said, "You got to watch this movie." Like it was like a dad movie. I mean,
Yeah,
I wasn't
how
too
young
young.
were you?
I was like probably
Okay.
14, so I was old enough. You know what I
All
mean?
right, that's
I was
good.
old
At
enough.
least you're past puberty. Good.
I'm past puberty. I kind of understand what's going on, and
Right.
but I remember watching it, and I'm such a lover of film. But that movie to me is one of those few things that you can watch it 1,000 times and know that there's not one detail or frame that should be changed. They really got it right,
Listen,
in my opinion. The
oh,
pacing,
it
the
was great.
timing, everything.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that because, 3 weeks ago, Turner Classic Movies had a film festival here in LA, and they were showing, and it was, and their theme was crime, and so they invited me to come, and they're going to show Dirty Harry on a big screen, and I was going to do an interview with the moderator and so forth, and I went to see it, and it was great. It was a packed house. I couldn't believe it. And I saw it on the big screen, and it was the first time I'd seen it on the big screen in a long time. And it blew me away. Blew me away. It's a great movie. It's an epic movie. And I'm sorry that most people have only seen it on the small screen, because on the big screen, it is just something else.
It comes alive, and it's one of those films that it does not matter how many years pass. It will capture an audience of any age, of any generation, and to have your mark on that. I mean, so what? How did that land in your lap, for lack of a better term? How did you come to be in Dirty Harry?
Because I had no idea how to get into movies or film. As far as I was concerned, I was a New York actor. I was happy being a New York actor. I was making enough money to live, and that was fine with me.
Beautiful.
And then a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, he said, my father is a director, and he's coming to town to direct a film. And I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. Not thinking about it. And then I got a call from, Chris Tabori was my friend and is my friend. And so I got a call to come in and see Don Siegel, who was Chris's father, and so I went into the meeting and I had no idea what the film was or anything. And so I said, could why am I here? And he said, well, I asked my son who's the best actor in New York, and he said Andy Robinson. And I laughed because at that time, man, there were some heavyweights in New York acting. I said, well, I'm flattered, but that's. And then that was the end of the meeting, pretty much. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. I was in a play at the same time, and a week later, the stage manager comes backstage before the play, and he says, "You'll never guess who's in the audience." I said, "Who?" And he's Clint Eastwood. And I said, oh, and I realized, oh, that's what the deal is. So Clint came to the play and signed off.
Wow. And and for people
Yeah,
really to put it in perspective, he was one of those massive stars in that era.
oh,
You
absolutely.
couldn't go anywhere type star.
Yeah.
And for him, now let me ask you, as a performer who knows, hey, there might be a role out there they're interested in me for. This A-list actor's in the audience is probably here to see me and see what I can do at least. Does that, I don't know, how does that affect your performance or does it at all? Because I feel like it would affect
I
me.
No, I'm one of those guys. I step up. I step up. I said, all right, let's go. Let's do this, And then the stage manager, it was a 2-act play. And so in intermission, the stage manager came back and said, Clint Eastwood just left. And I said, oh, well, okay, that's that. But, all he needed was to see the one act, and then he split.
Oh, so this was, you're breaking into movies in this big role, being a New York actor on stage. I know people think, maybe the layman might think acting is acting, right? I mean, whether you're doing it on a stage or a screen, but there are intricacies to the arts and the mediums, right? There's differences that you have to do. When you're a theater actor, you're projecting to the back row, maybe bigger action so everybody understands. But the camera, when you're working in front of a camera, it's all right there. And I feel like you have to be more subdued. Was there any difficulty in the transition from stage to screen for you, or were you able to adapt rather quickly?
Yeah, good question, Brad. Yeah, there was a bit. There was an adjustment, but I was working with a genius. Don Siegel was the best director I had ever worked with. This is a guy who knew his business. He'd been around for a while, and he schooled me. He was my mentor, and he very quickly, showed me, like this is the screen, and you're acting within that screen, and you're not in a theater, and you're acting for the camera. And there's, whereas there are, hundreds of points of view when you're in a real theater with hundreds of people sitting in the audience, and there's only one point of view, which is the camera. And he very quickly, they let me, they sort of eased me in. They didn't give me the hard stuff until later, and it was a great experience. It really was. I remember that experience as if it were yesterday.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I mean, I had to go watch, the scene, where he has the famous line, "Do you feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?" Because I just feel like the tension that's built in that moment is so incredible. And the way, that's why I said you can't change a single frame of that movie. It's so great from beginning to end. When you have stuff like Comicpalooza coming up again, we're excited to have you here in Houston, Texas. Is Dirty Harry the one that people come up to you more, or is it more Star Trek? What is the project people seem to come and ask you about the most?
Now, there are 3. Star Trek is the most. Certainly Dirty Harry, which always blows my mind. And this horror film I did, Hellraiser,
Of course, yeah.
which is maybe one of the a very strange but very effective film. It was the weirdest film I was ever in, but I loved it because I got a chance to play a good brother and a bad brother. So there were 2 roles, and I had such a great time.
Yeah,
and it was, but it's scary. That's a very scary movie. So, yeah.
And also, similar to Star Trek fans, horror fans are rabid as well. If you're a fan of horror and that genre, almost every movie, categorically speaking, you have an index, an encyclopedic mind for it. We're excited to have you here in Houston. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I feel like I could sit down with you for a long time and we could talk about acting. I love your insight about it, and I just really appreciate you taking the time for me today.
Thank you so much, Brad. I had a great time.
We'll see you in Houston at Comicpalooza. Thank you, Mr. Andrew Robinson.